Preface. The moon did not always feel like a blessing. Sometimes, it was a cruel witness, silent, cold, and unflinching, as lives shattered beneath its pale gaze. Amelie Ashwood once believed in the goddess's gift of mates. She had been young, hopeful, and foolish when she first touched the bond, when she felt that spark of eternity ignite between her and Alpha Tate. She had thought it meant safety. She had thought it meant love. But the bond was a chain, not a promise. Tate's lies festered in her veins like venom. Each betrayal left a deeper wound, each whispered cruelty reminded her that even the goddess's will could be twisted into something monstrous. When the bond finally broke, it was not with quiet sorrow but with blood and fire. The rejection ritual burned her soul, carved a black scar where her mate mark should have been, and branded her as cursed in the eyes of her pack. She had walked away from Tate alive, but less than whole. On another corner of the world, Alpha Gideon Alios howled into the same merciless moon. His mate, his Luna, his heart, died the night his daughters were born, leaving him with nothing but silence and grief. Once the fiercest alpha of his age, Gideon became a ghost draped in flesh, surviving only because two infant souls depended on him to keep breathing. Two broken wolves. One scarred by betrayal. One hollowed by loss. The goddess was not done. Threads of fate wove silently through shadow and blood, pulling them toward each other. Neither asked for a second chance. Neither wanted one. And yet, the moon would not release them. Because some scars were never meant to fade. Some scars were meant to lead. Crossed Swords Episode 1, The Ritual of Rejection. The night smelled of iron and ash. Amelie Ashwood stood at the center of the stone circle, her bare feet pressing into the damp earth. Around her, the pack gathered like vultures, their whispers a tide of venom cutting into her skin sharper than claws ever could. Rejected. Cursed. She'll never find another mate. The goddess will never forgive her. Their voices merged into a steady hum, a chant of disdain that wrapped around her like a shroud. Tate stood opposite her, tall and proud, with that cruel smirk she had once thought charming. His dark eyes glittered with satisfaction as he raised his hand, calling the flames of the ritual to life. The air shimmered with power, old, binding, and merciless. Amelie's chest ached as the bond between them quivered. The invisible thread that had tied her soul to his for years began to fray, unraveling strand by strand. She could feel it, the tearing, the splintering, as though claws raked her heart from the inside. "You were never enough for me," Tate said, his voice sharp enough for the entire pack to hear. He wanted witnesses. He wanted her humiliation carved into memory. "You were weak, unworthy of my name, unworthy of my pack. From this night forward, I, Alpha Tate of the Blood Fong, reject you as my mate." The words sliced through her like a blade. The magic of the ritual surged, demanding an answer. Amelie's knees threatened to buckle, her wolf howling inside her chest. She could deny him, cling to the bond, beg the goddess to mend it, but no. She would not. Not after years of lies, of watching him take others into his bed, of being made to feel like a burden instead of a Luna. Her hands curled into fists. She lifted her chin, meeting Tate's gaze, and let her voice carry into the night. "I, Amelie Ashwood, accept your rejection. From this day forward, you are nothing to me." The bond shattered. The explosion of agony dropped her to her knees. Fire ripped through her veins, searing her skin, twisting deep into her soul. A scream tore from her throat as the mark on her neck, the once golden imprint of the goddess's gift, blackened, scar tissue spreading like veins of shadow. The cursed scar burned with unnatural heat, a brand of disgrace and survival all in one. Gasps rippled through the pack. Mothers covered their children's eyes. Warriors looked away in discomfort. "She's marked. By the goddess. Or by death itself. Look at that scar, it's unnatural." Tate only laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Pathetic. Even the goddess doesn't want you." Something inside Amelie broke then, not her pride, but the last fragile threads of the girl who had once believed in forever. She pushed herself to her feet, swaying from the pain but refusing to bow. Her scar throbbed, black and angry, but she met the gazes of her pack one by one, letting them see that she still stood. "I may be rejected," she said, her voice hoarse but steady, "but I am not broken. Remember that." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the scar burning across her skin, Amelie turned and walked into the night. The gates of the Blood Fang pack closed behind her, and the forest swallowed her whole. For the first time in years, she was free. But freedom came at a cost. And the scar she carried was more than just a mark of shame, it was a key, though she did not yet know what it unlocked. Far away, under the same moon, an alpha cradled his newborn daughters and mourned the death of his mate. The howl he loosed into the night echoed through the trees, colliding with the silence that wrapped around Amelie as she walked. Two broken wolves. Two fates beginning to intertwine. And the goddess watched, waiting. Episode 2, Ashes of a Mate. The birthing chamber smelled of blood. Not the blood of victory, not the coppery tang of a battlefield, but of endings. It clung to the air, thick and suffocating, drowning out even the incense the healers had lit in desperation. Alpha Gideon Alios paced like a caged beast, his hands shaking though he tried to hide it from the pack healers. The most powerful alpha of his generation, the wolf who had broken a dozen rival packs in his youth, was now powerless before the fragile body of the only woman who had ever tamed him. Celine. His Luna. His mate. His soul. Her cries cut through him like silver blades. Each scream was worse than the last, shredding the bond between them strand by strand. The mate link pulsed erratically in his chest, once steady as a heartbeat, now flickering like a candle in a storm. "She's losing too much blood," the head healer whispered, too quiet for anyone but Gideon's sharp ears to catch. "We can save the children, but the Luna. Don't you dare finish that sentence." Gideon's voice was a snarl, sharp and desperate. His claws half-sprouted, his wolf howling in frantic denial inside him. "You will save her. You hear me? You will save her." But even as he spoke, he knew. Wolves were not supposed to fear death, but this was different. This was wrong. The goddess would not, could not, be so cruel. Another scream. Then silence. The world tilted. Gideon rushed to the bedside, his knees almost giving way when he saw Celine's face. Her golden eyes, once radiant, always warm, were half-lidded now, dulling. Blood streaked her pale skin. Her lips trembled as she tried to form words. "Gideon," her voice was barely a breath. "I'm here. I'm here, love. Don't you dare leave me." He grabbed her hand, pressing it to his chest, to the pounding heart that refused to accept this. "Stay. For me. For them." The bond shivered. He could feel her slipping through it, threads breaking one by one. "Our daughters," Celine whispered. Her gaze flicked toward the healers, who worked frantically at the foot of the bed. "Promise, protect them." The word struck him harder than any enemy's claw. Daughters. Plural. His heart ached with a twisted mixture of pride and terror. He wanted to rejoice. He wanted to rage. "You'll see them yourself," he choked out, refusing to speak the truth. Refusing to accept what she was asking. "We'll raise them together." But her eyes were already glazing with the silver sheen of death. The mate bond convulsed inside him, one final violent surge of love and pain. Then it snapped. The silence that followed was unbearable. It wasn't just sound that vanished, it was warmth, light, the tether that had anchored him for years. Half of his soul was gone. Torn away. Gideon's roar shook the chamber, primal and broken, the howl of a wolf who had lost everything. The pack outside would later say they had never heard anything like it, raw grief made flesh, a sound that made even the strongest warriors fall to their knees. The healers moved quickly, swaddling two tiny bundles. Two daughters. Their cries filled the air, high and piercing, the only proof that Celine's sacrifice had not been in vain. When the healer tried to place them in his arms, Gideon almost refused. His hands trembled violently, his chest heaved with ragged sobs, and his wolf clawed inside him, demanding he reject reality. But then one of the infants stirred, a small hand pressing weakly against his finger, and something inside him shifted. His daughters. His blood. His last link to her. The girls were mirror images of one another, both with tufts of dark hair, both squirming and wailing. But their eyes, when they blinked open for the first time, were not identical. One pair shone golden, just like Celine's. The other gleamed a stormy silver, the rare mark of wolves touched by the goddess herself. The pack murmured in awe. Some whispered it was a blessing. Others feared it was an omen. Gideon silenced them all with a single glare. "They are mine," he growled, his voice raw but ironclad. "Anyone who questions that will answer to me." He sat there for hours, unmoving, his massive frame curled protectively around the two tiny bundles. Celine's body had been covered, prepared for the sacred pyre, but Gideon couldn't yet bring himself to leave her side. His daughters slept fitfully against his chest, unaware of the blood-soaked world they had been born into. They were so small, so fragile. And he was so broken. But he had promised. That night, under the merciless eye of the moon, Gideon built the pyre himself. No warrior dared stop him. He carried Celine's body in his own arms, laying her upon the wood with a tenderness that made even the hardest soldiers weep. When the flames caught, he stood watch until nothing remained but ash. Ashes of a mate. Ashes of a heart. The howl he loosed into the night was not just grief, it was a vow. He would not fail his daughters. He would not let the world take them as it had taken her. And somewhere in the distance, deep in the forest, a scarred woman walked beneath the same moonlight, her hand pressed to the blackened mark on her neck. The goddess watched them both. The threads of fate drew tighter. Two wolves. One scarred, one hollow. Both broken. And the story had only begun. Episode 3, Exile and Survival. The forest was not kind. Amelie Ashwood had known that the moment the gates of her pack slammed shut behind her. Wolves of blood claw did not grant mercy to the exiled. They did not allow a clean break. When they cast you out, they wanted you to suffer. To bleed. To wither until the wilds claimed you. She stumbled through the undergrowth, bare feet torn and bleeding, her body trembling from exhaustion. The scar burned on her neck, a jagged, black mark where the rejection ritual had seared her skin. Once, the mate bond had glowed warm there, a promise of belonging. Now it throbbed with a sickly heat, as if the wound itself had teeth, gnawing at her from within. Every time she touched it, whispers brushed against her mind. Unwanted. Weak. Cursed. She didn't know if the voices were real or just her own self-loathing made manifest. The rogues did, though. Word spread quickly in the wild lands between packs. They had smelled her blood before she had even crossed into the no-man's land. Rogues were wolves without bonds, without loyalty, without conscience. They lived like scavengers, feeding on weakness. And to them, Amelie was the perfect prey. Her first night alone, she barely survived. She had made a fire, small, weak, but enough to keep her trembling body from freezing. The shadows had moved around her, eyes glinting yellow and red in the darkness. They crept closer, circling, waiting. The first attack came swift, a blur of gray fur lunging from the tree line. She barely rolled aside in time, its claws raking her arm. Pain seared, but instinct carried her. Her wolf, though wounded and battered from the rejection ritual, surged forward. Fight. She shifted, bones cracking, flesh tearing, until her wolf form stood panting beneath the moon. Not as strong as before, her bonds severed, her strength diminished, but enough. She lunged at the rogue, jaws snapping around its throat. Hot blood filled her mouth. The others backed away at the sight of it, growling low but unwilling to strike. That night, Amelie didn't sleep. She stood guard over her meager fire, her fur matted with blood, her golden eyes burning with feral defiance. She had lived. Barely. But survival was not the same as living. Days bled together. She scavenged for food, stole from abandoned hunter camps, drank from streams that stank of iron. Every wound festered longer than it should. The scar drained her, slowing her healing, leaving her weaker with every passing moon. Wolves whispered of it when they saw her, those rare loners who crossed her path and lived long enough to tell others. The cursed one. The scarred wolf. They say the mark isn't just a wound. It's a tether to something darker. Some spat in her direction, as if her very existence offended them. Others tried to kill her outright, hoping to claim whatever power the scar might hold. She fought. She bled. She kept moving. And always, the memory of Tate's smirk haunted her, the alpha who had once called her his, who had whispered promises of forever before ripping it all away. His betrayal cut deeper than any claw. His rejection had carved more than a scar into her skin. It had carved into her soul. When loneliness pressed too hard against her chest, she spoke to the moon. "Why me?" she whispered one night, sitting by the ashes of another half-burnt campfire. Her voice cracked, hoarse from days without speech. "Why curse me with this? Why let me live, when you've taken everything?" The moon, as always, gave no answer. Only the scar pulsed, black veins spidering faintly under her skin, as if the mark itself was alive. She thought about surrendering, sometimes. About lying down in the forest and letting the rogues tear her apart. About letting the hunger eat her alive. Death would be easier than this endless struggle. But every time she considered it, something inside her refused. A flicker. A spark. Her wolf, battered but unbroken, growled against the despair. Not yet. Not like this. One evening, after weeks of wandering, she stumbled into a human village at the edge of wolf territory. The humans there whispered when they saw her scar, clutching their children and crossing themselves with old charms. They offered no food, no shelter, only fear. But one old woman, blind in one eye and crooked as a withered tree, stopped her. "That mark," the crone rasped, pointing with a gnarled finger. "It will bring you pain. It will bring others death. But it will also bring the world to its knees." Amelie froze, throat tight. "What do you mean?" The woman only laughed, a sound like brittle bones snapping. "The goddess does not waste scars. She forges queens with them." Amelie left before dawn, unsettled, carrying the woman's words like stones in her chest. She was no queen. She was barely surviving. But still, she walked. One step, then another. Past the blood, past the hunger, past the whispers. Because deep inside her, something told her this exile was not an ending. It was the first chapter of something far greater. And far more dangerous. The forest still hunted her. The rogue still circled. The scar still burned. But Amelie Ashwood survived. And survival was the sharpest weapon of all. Episode 4, Shadows of the Twins. The nursery was too quiet. Alpha Gideon Alios stood in the doorway, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the room. The faint scent of milk lingered in the air, mingling with lavender sachets placed by the pack healers. Two cradles sat side by side, carved from dark oak and lined with soft wool. Inside, the twins stirred, tiny fists clenched, faces scrunched, the spitting image of their mother. Of her. His throat tightened, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. He had faced 1,000 battles without fear. He had ripped out the throats of rogues, stood against armies, and commanded respect with a single growl. But here, standing before the fragile lives his Luna had left behind, Gideon felt powerless. One child whimpered in her sleep, the sound sharp as claws against his heart. "It's all right, little one," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He reached down, calloused fingers trembling as he brushed the baby's cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft, her heart beat fast and fluttering like a bird's wings. She stilled under his touch, her lips parting with a tiny sigh. The other stirred then, waking with a hungry cry that pierced the silence. Gideon cursed softly under his breath, scooping her up with a stiffness that betrayed how foreign this task felt. He was an alpha. A leader. Not a nursemaid. But there was no one else. Not anymore. He carried her carefully, awkwardly, until she nestled against his chest. Her cries softened but did not cease. "I don't know what I'm doing," Gideon admitted quietly, his voice breaking in the dark. Your mother would have known. She would have soothed you. She would have. His words died in his throat. He pressed his lips against the baby's soft head, inhaling her scent, and swallowed hard. How do I protect them when I couldn't even protect her? The twins became his world in the weeks that followed. Gideon no longer slept more than a few hours at a time. He rose with their cries, fed them, held them until his arms ached. He carried them into council meetings, their small sounds interrupting conversations about territory and treaties. His warriors tried not to stare, but he saw the unease in their eyes. An alpha without a Luna was vulnerable. An alpha with 2 newborns was weaker still. And weakness was blood in the water. Whispers traveled faster than any messenger. Across the borders, rival alphas heard of Luna Celeste's death. They heard Gideon was grieving, distracted, that his once unbreakable focus was split between leading his pack and raising his children. Some mocked him. Others plotted. The Black Fang pack prowled near their northern border, their warriors seen more frequently, testing the defenses. To the east, the Iron Claw pack withdrew from trade agreements, citing uncertainty of leadership. Even within his own walls, Gideon felt the cracks spreading. At night, when the twins finally slept, he sat in the war room staring at maps dotted with enemy markers. His beta, Marcus, stood across from him, voice low and urgent. They think you're weak, Alpha. They think the twins are your leash. If they strike now, if they rally together. They won't, Gideon growled, his eyes flashing. The wolf inside him rumbled with fury, desperate to tear apart anyone who dared threaten his daughters. Marcus hesitated, then said, Your grief blinds you. You can't protect them alone. The words cut deep because they were true. Gideon was only one man, even if he carried the strength of an alpha. The weight of leadership and fatherhood threatened to crush him daily. Yet surrender was not an option. Still, the shadows crept closer. One night, he found a message nailed to the border post, scrawled in blood across wolf hide. Pups make easy prey. The alpha's bloodline will end. Gideon tore it down, fury trembling in his hands. Whoever dared threaten his daughters would regret it. He doubled the patrols, set guards around the nursery day and night. But even then, unease gnawed at him. Because danger did not only come from outside. In the corridors of his pack house, whispers spread. Some of his warriors questioned if the goddess had cursed him. Others muttered that perhaps the twins should be hidden away, sent to kin in distant lands. Gideon heard every word, though none dared speak them in his presence. He saw it in their eyes, the doubt, the fear. His wolves loved him, yes, but love frayed quickly when survival was at stake. An alpha who faltered risked losing his throne. And Gideon could not falter. One evening, after another long day of council disputes and border reports, he returned to the nursery. The sight of his daughters, their tiny chests rising and falling in unison, steadied him. For them, he would not break. For them, he would become steel again. He swore it silently, pressing a kiss to each forehead. You are my legacy, he whispered. My strength. No shadow, no enemy, no betrayal will take you from me. But outside the walls of his pack, the shadows gathered. Rivals sharpened their claws. Traitors waited for the right moment to strike. And the twins, innocent, fragile, glowing with the light of their mother's memory, became the beacon that would draw both salvation and destruction. For in the world of wolves, nothing shone brighter than weakness. And nothing was more tempting to darkness than a future not yet claimed. Episode 4, Shadows of the Twins. The nursery was too quiet. Alpha Gideon Alios stood in the doorway, his massive frame casting a long shadow across the room. The faint scent of milk lingered in the air, mingling with lavender sachets placed by the pack healers. 2 cradles sat side by side, carved from dark oak and lined with soft wool. Inside, the twins stirred, tiny fists clenched, faces scrunched, the spitting image of their mother. Of her. His throat tightened, and for a moment he couldn't breathe. He had faced 1,000 battles without fear. He had ripped out the throats of rogues, stood against armies, and commanded respect with a single growl. But here, standing before the fragile lives his Luna had left behind, Gideon felt powerless. One child whimpered in her sleep, the sound sharp as claws against his heart. "It's all right, little one," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He reached down, calloused fingers trembling as he brushed the baby's cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft, her heart beat fast and fluttering like a bird's wings. She stilled under his touch, her lips parting with a tiny sigh. The other stirred then, waking with a hungry cry that pierced the silence. Gideon cursed softly under his breath, scooping her up with a stiffness that betrayed how foreign this task felt. He was an alpha. A leader. Not a nursemaid. But there was no one else. Not anymore. He carried her carefully, awkwardly, until she nestled against his chest. Her cries softened but did not cease. "I don't know what I'm doing," Gideon admitted quietly, his voice breaking in the dark. "Your mother would have known. She would have soothed you. She would have." His words died in his throat. He pressed his lips against the baby's soft head, inhaling her scent, and swallowed hard. How do I protect them when I couldn't even protect her? The twins became his world in the weeks that followed. Gideon no longer slept more than a few hours at a time. He rose with their cries, fed them, held them until his arms ached. He carried them into council meetings, their small sounds interrupting conversations about territory and treaties. His warriors tried not to stare, but he saw the unease in their eyes. An alpha without a Luna was vulnerable. An alpha with 2 newborns was weaker still. And weakness was blood in the water. Whispers traveled faster than any messenger. Across the borders, rival alphas heard of Luna Celeste's death. They heard Gideon was grieving, distracted, that his once unbreakable focus was split between leading his pack and raising his children. Some mocked him. Others plotted. The Black Fang pack prowled near their northern border, their warriors seen more frequently, testing the defenses. To the east, the Iron Claw pack withdrew from trade agreements, citing uncertainty of leadership. Even within his own walls, Gideon felt the cracks spreading. At night, when the twins finally slept, he sat in the war room staring at maps dotted with enemy markers. His beta, Marcus, stood across from him, voice low and urgent. "They think you're weak, Alpha. They think the twins are your leash. If they strike now, if they rally together." "They won't," Gideon growled, his eyes flashing. The wolf inside him rumbled with fury, desperate to tear apart anyone who dared threaten his daughters. Marcus hesitated, then said, "Your grief blinds you. You can't protect them alone." The words cut deep because they were true. Gideon was only one man, even if he carried the strength of an alpha. The weight of leadership and fatherhood threatened to crush him daily. Yet surrender was not an option. Still, the shadows crept closer. One night, he found a message nailed to the border post, scrawled in blood across wolf hide. "Pups make easy prey. The alpha's bloodline will end." Gideon tore it down, fury trembling in his hands. Whoever dared threaten his daughters would regret it. He doubled the patrols, set guards around the nursery day and night. But even then, unease gnawed at him. Because danger did not only come from outside. In the corridors of his pack house, whispers spread. Some of his warriors questioned if the goddess had cursed him. Others muttered that perhaps the twins should be hidden away, sent to kin in distant lands. Gideon heard every word, though none dared speak them in his presence. He saw it in their eyes, the doubt, the fear. His wolves loved him, yes, but love frayed quickly when survival was at stake. An alpha who faltered risked losing his throne. And Gideon could not falter. One evening, after another long day of council disputes and border reports, he returned to the nursery. The sight of his daughters, their tiny chests rising and falling in unison, steadied him. For them, he would not break. For them, he would become steel again. He swore it silently, pressing a kiss to each forehead. "You are my legacy," he whispered. "My strength. No shadow, no enemy, no betrayal will take you from me." But outside the walls of his pack, the shadows gathered. Rivals sharpened their claws. Traitors waited for the right moment to strike. And the twins, innocent, fragile, glowing with the light of their mother's memory, became the beacon that would draw both salvation and destruction. For in the world of wolves, nothing shone brighter than weakness. And nothing was more tempting to darkness than a future not yet claimed. Episode 6, The Alpha's Scarred Stranger. The forest still reeked of blood when Gideon ordered Amelie to follow. She should have run the other way. Every instinct screamed for her to vanish into the wilderness, to put as much distance between herself and the Alpha with the molten gold eyes as possible. Yet her body betrayed her. Something about his voice, command, steady, unrelenting, wrapped around her like a chain. Her wolf thrashed, torn between fight and surrender. She spat into the dirt, forcing her trembling legs to move. "I don't need your pack. You need shelter," Gideon answered without looking back. He shifted into his wolf again, a massive shadow against the moonlight, and stalked forward. "Follow or die out here. Your choice." Amelie cursed under her breath, but followed. By dawn, they reached the Iron Fang border. Sentinels patrolled the tree line, shifting uneasily when they saw Gideon return with a stranger. Their eyes lingered on Amelie's scar, widening in unease. Whispers traveled faster than the wind. "Is she cursed? Why would Alpha bring her here? She smells wrong." Amelie felt every word like a knife in her back. She pulled her tattered shawl tighter around her shoulders, lowering her head. Her wolf prowled restlessly beneath her skin, humiliated. One sentinel, braver than the rest, stepped forward. "Alpha, with respect, who is she?" Gideon's golden eyes snapped toward him. "She's under my protection." The words silenced the patrol instantly. None dared question him further. But Amelie caught the edge in their gazes. Fear. Suspicion. A stranger with a cursed scar brought into their midst, it would fester. "I shouldn't be here," she thought. "This will end in fire. It always does." Gideon led her through the heart of Iron Fang territory. The pack settlement was sprawling, built into the forest with rough-hewn homes and watchtowers. Wolves shifted in and out of human form, carrying wood, sparring, preparing meals. Families, children, laughter, things Amelie had long forgotten existed. Everywhere she walked, silence followed. Wolves stopped mid-step to stare at her, mothers pulling pups closer, warriors narrowing their eyes. Her scar burned hotter beneath their gazes. By the time Gideon brought her to the Alpha's house, a great timber hall overlooking the river, her nerves were raw. She lingered at the threshold, clutching the doorway as though it might collapse. "I'm not staying here," she said flatly. "You are," Gideon replied, holding the door open for her. His tone brooked no refusal. "I'm not one of your pack." His gaze sharpened. "Not yet." She froze. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," Gideon said evenly, "that until I know who put that scar on you and why rogues are hunting you, you're under Iron Fang's watch. Whether you like it or not." Amelie's breath caught. She wanted to scream, to claw at his certainty. But exhaustion weighed heavier than rage. With a bitter laugh, she pushed past him into the hall. Word spread quickly. By nightfall, Gideon stood before his inner circle with Amelie seated at his side like an unwanted shadow. His beta, Rourke, scowled openly. "Alpha, this is madness. We don't know what she is." "She's cursed," another warrior muttered. "She's dangerous," a third added. Amelie's fists clenched on her lap. She wanted to leap to her feet, to scream that she was not their enemy. But years of being branded a burden, a liability, taught her silence. Better to endure their contempt than draw more fire. Gideon, however, did not stay silent. He rose to his full height, golden eyes burning. "Enough. She is under my protection. Until I say otherwise, you will treat her as one of us." The room stilled. The force of his Alpha command rolled through the hall, leaving no space for dissent. Amelie felt it ripple across her skin, a strange mix of awe and dread. Why would he shield her? He didn't even know her. But worse than the suspicion of the others was the truth gnawing at her bones. She felt safer here, beside him, than she had in years. That night, Gideon brought her to a chamber at the far end of the hall. Sparse, but warm, with furs and a small hearth. "You'll stay here. She folded her arms. And if I refuse? Then you'll sleep in the forest with rogues. Her jaw worked, but she said nothing. As he turned to leave, she blurted, "Why are you doing this?" He paused at the doorway, shoulders rigid. "You don't even know me," she pressed, her voice trembling. "Your wolves hate me. That scar," she touched her neck, teeth gritted, "is a curse. People die because of it. If you keep me here, your pack will suffer." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Gideon turned, his eyes shadowed. "I lost my mate to curses and fate. I won't lose another wolf to the same darkness. Not while I still breathe." Amelie's chest tightened painfully. She wanted to ask if he felt it too, the strange pull, the heat that flared whenever their eyes met. But fear held her tongue. When he left, closing the door behind him, she pressed her forehead to the wood, whispering, "I can't be what you think I am." Days bled together. Amelie kept to herself, slipping through corridors, avoiding the glares of pack wolves. Children peered at her from behind corners, wide-eyed. Warriors muttered about bad omens. Yet Gideon watched her. Always. She caught him on the training fields, his body moving with lethal precision. She caught him at dawn, patrolling the borders, speaking in low tones with Rourke. And sometimes, too often, she caught his gaze lingering on her, unreadable. She told herself it meant nothing. That he only wanted answers about the scar. But her wolf whispered otherwise. On the fourth night, Amelie woke screaming. Her scar seared with fire, burning brighter than ever before. She clawed at her throat, gasping, convulsing. Shadows writhed at the edges of her vision, voices whispering in languages she didn't know. The door slammed open. Gideon rushed to her, catching her as she collapsed. "Amelie." His voice was raw, panicked. He gathered her against his chest, hands pressing over the scar. The heat of his touch sent shocks through her, momentarily easing the pain. Her wolf surged forward, howling his name though her lips couldn't form the sound. And then, light. Amelie's vision exploded in silver radiance. She was no longer in her chamber but standing beneath a moonlit sky, endless and shimmering. A figure approached across the stars. Tall, robed in silver fire, eyes the color of eternity. The Moon Goddess. Episode 7, Wolves in the Walls. The silver radiance still clung to her skin when Amelie gasped awake. Sweat slicked her temples, her chest heaving as though she had run miles. Gideon's arms were still around her, his heartbeat a steady drum against her ear. But she could not focus on him, only on the lingering echo of the voice she had heard in that impossible dream. "You are more than the scar," the Moon Goddess had whispered. "You are the fracture and the key. Wolves will hunt you, wolves will follow you. Beware the ones inside your walls." Amelie clutched the furs, trembling. She had wanted answers, clarity, truth. Instead, the goddess had left her with riddles and dread. Gideon's hand brushed against her cheek. "Amelie. Look at me. What happened?" Her eyes met his, molten gold, sharp as steel yet softened with concern, and she nearly broke. She wanted to tell him everything. But the memory of the council's suspicion, of the whispers that painted her cursed and dangerous, closed her throat. If she admitted the goddess had marked her, they would see her as a weapon. Or worse, a target. "Just a nightmare," she lied, forcing her voice steady. "I get them often." Gideon didn't believe her. She could see it in the tight line of his jaw, the flicker of frustration in his eyes. But he didn't push. Instead, he pulled the blanket tighter around her and murmured, "You're safe here. No nightmare can touch you in my hall." She wanted to believe him. But even as his words settled over her like a shield, the goddess's warning lingered, cold and sharp, "Beware the ones inside your walls." The next days brought a heavy stillness to Iron Fang. The forest outside the walls seemed too quiet, the air thick with waiting. Rogues hadn't been sighted in over a week, yet tension threaded through the pack like barbed wire. Amelie could feel it every time she walked through the settlement, the quick whispers cut off as she passed, the way eyes followed her scar as if it glowed. Children no longer peeked at her in curiosity. They avoided her altogether, pulled away by their mother's hands. Warriors paused in training to watch her like she was a blade aimed at their throats. Her nights were worse. The scar burned more frequently, waking her with phantom whispers that curled like smoke in her skull. She didn't dare tell Gideon. If the pack already distrusted her, what would they do if they knew the darkness inside her was alive? Yet there were moments, brief, unguarded, when Gideon's presence cut through the weight. One evening, she found him alone on the watchtower, staring out at the tree-line. He didn't hear her approach until she leaned against the railing beside him. "You don't sleep much, do you?" she asked softly. He glanced at her, surprise flashing across his face. "Neither do you." She huffed, trying to hide the unease tightening her chest. "Nightmares. Remember?" The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "Nightmares don't scare you half as much as you claim. Maybe I've gotten used to them." His gaze lingered, searching, as though he could peel back her words and see the truth beneath. And for a moment, standing side by side with the night wind on their faces, Amelie felt something dangerous flicker between them. Something warm. But warmth had no place in Iron Fang, not with the whispers growing louder every day. The first sign came when food went missing. Small things, at first. Dried meat. Herbs. A sack of grain. The pack blamed hungry rogues daring to slip past their borders, but Amelie noticed something the others didn't: no tracks led away from the walls. The thefts were from within. The second sign came in the form of sabotage. A section of the southern watchtower collapsed during repairs, nearly killing 2 sentinels. The supports had been deliberately weakened. When Gideon discovered it, his fury shook the entire whole. His voice echoed through the pack settlement, sharp as a whip. "There is a traitor among us. I will find them. And when I do, there will be no mercy." But Amelie knew the truth already. The moon goddess's words haunted her every time she closed her eyes. "Beware the ones inside your walls." That night, she wandered the corridors restlessly, her wolf pacing inside her. The hallways were dim, torches guttering low. It was only by chance she caught it, the faint scrape of claws where there should have been none. She froze, listening. A shadow slipped along the far wall, vanishing into a side chamber. Every instinct screamed to run back to Gideon, to wake him, to let him deal with it. But something deeper urged her forward. She moved silently, pressing close to the walls, until she reached the chamber door. Inside, 2 figures stood hunched together. Their voices were a low hiss, but her hearing caught every word. "Gunnar grows impatient," one said. "He wants the girl. If we don't deliver soon, he'll bring the war to Iron Fang himself." Amelie's blood went cold. The other figure snarled. "Then tell him patience. Gideon suspects nothing. The pack is restless. All it will take is one push." Amelie stumbled back, her scar burning so fiercely she thought it might split her skin. Gunnar. He was here, inside these walls, in spirit if not in flesh. And his claws were already reaching through his traitors. She ran. Her bare feet slapped against the floor, heart hammering, breath sharp in her throat. She needed to tell Gideon. Needed to warn him before it was too late. But when she burst into his chamber, breathless and pale, words tumbling from her lips, his expression darkened, not with belief, but with something colder. "2 traitors," he repeated slowly. "I heard them," she insisted. "They said Gunnar's name. They're working with him, inside Iron Fang." Rourke, summoned by the commotion, sneered. "Convenient. The cursed stranger just happens to overhear conspiracies in the dead of night. How do we know it isn't you feeding rogues from inside our walls?" The accusation struck like a blade. Amelie's chest seized, her voice breaking. "I would never." "Enough." Gideon's command cut the air. His eyes burned into her, but there was no softness now, no warmth. Only the alpha. "If what you say is true, I'll find them myself. Until then, you will not roam these halls at night. Do you understand?" She recoiled as if slapped. The scar throbbed beneath her collarbone, heat and shame pooling together. She wanted to scream that he was blind, that the wolves in the walls were closing in. But the look in his eyes, unbending, mistrustful, shut her mouth. When she returned to her chamber, the goddess's words thundered in her skull like a curse. Beware the ones inside your walls. And somewhere, deep in the shadows of Iron Fang, the traitors whispered their plans, the walls listening. The war gunner promised was already inside. Episode 8, The Twins' Bond. The days after the accusation bled into one another like storm clouds across a restless sky. Iron Fang no longer felt like a fortress, it felt like a cage, and Amelie was the animal pacing inside it, watched by suspicious eyes. The whispers were constant. She's cursed. She brings Gunner's shadow with her. She'll slit Gideon's throat in his sleep. No one spoke those words to her face, but she heard them all the same. The walls of Iron Fang carried voices well, especially when venom fueled them. Rourke no longer hid his disdain. He avoided her in the hallways, or worse, stared at her openly with the blunt hostility of a wolf daring her to bare her teeth. Gideon said nothing when his brother's contempt cut sharp, though Amelie could see the tension carved into his shoulders whenever Rourke baited her. It was Gideon she clung to in silence, though she did not dare confess how much she depended on him. In the rare moments he allowed his walls to drop, when he sat beside her by the fire without speaking, or when his hand brushed hers as he passed her bread at dinner, the world felt less like it was collapsing. But those moments were fleeting, gone too quickly, drowned beneath the weight of his duty. She dreamed again. The moon goddess's voice threaded through the darkness of her sleep, velvet and unyielding. Blood binds you. Fire awakens you. Two shadows guard your path, yet only together will they make you whole. Trust the bond, little wolf. It is yours, though you do not yet see it. Amelie woke with the scar searing against her skin. She pressed her palm to it, breath shuddering. Two shadows. Two guards. The twins. The first attack came at dawn. Iron Fang sentinels had barely sounded the alarm before rogues descended on the outer walls. They came with feral howls, blood-matted fur and eyes glazed with the madness of Alpha Gunner's influence. Amelie ran to the battlements with the others, heart pounding. She had no training, no weapon, yet something inside her urged her to be there, to see. The twins were already fighting. Gideon's wolf, massive, iron-gray, his eyes burning gold, was a storm of precision and strength. He tore through rogues with terrifying grace, each movement efficient, ruthless. Rourke was fire to his brother's steel. His wolf, darker and leaner, fought with raw ferocity, reckless and wild, blood painting his muzzle as he ripped into enemy after enemy. For the first time, Amelie understood why the council called them the twin blades of Iron Fang. Together, they were unstoppable. They moved as though one mind drove them, anticipating each other's strikes, covering each other's weaknesses. The rogues fell like wheat before a scythe. And yet, Iron Fang bled. Rogues slipped through cracks, overwhelming lesser fighters, clawing into homes. Screams filled the air. Amelie's body trembled with the urge to do something. But she was powerless, no wolf, no weapon, only the curse that burned hotter with every passing moment. When a rogue leapt onto the battlement where she stood, she reacted without thinking. The creature's weight slammed her to the ground, its stench choking her. Its claws slashed for her throat. And the world exploded. Her scar erupted in searing silver light. For an instant, she wasn't in her body but everywhere, inside the rogue's mind, inside the walls, inside the hearts of the warriors around her. She felt Gideon's fury like a blade, Rourke's reckless fire like a storm. And she pulled. The rogue howled, convulsed, and fell lifeless beside her. The silver light guttered, fading back into the scar on her chest. When her vision cleared, Gideon was there, bloodied and furious, yanking her to her feet. "What did you just do?" I don't know," she stammered, dizzy, the scar still burning. But Rourke had seen it too. His eyes narrowed, suspicion and something darker twisting across his face. "She's tied to Gunner. He's using her to get inside our walls." "No," Gideon snapped, but doubt edged his voice. He had felt it too, the surge of power, the unnatural bond. Before she could speak, another wave of rogues crashed against the walls. Gideon released her, his wolf form bursting free again, and he plunged back into the fray. Rourke followed, his snarl carrying over the chaos. Amelie stood frozen, her hands trembling, silver sparks still crackling faintly at her fingertips. She had felt their wolves. Felt their bond. And in that moment, she had not been apart from it, she had been inside it, a third cord binding their power together. The battle dragged into the afternoon before the rogues finally scattered, their corpses littering the blood-soaked ground. Ironfang's warriors limped home, bloodied and exhausted. The twins stood at the gate, wolves panting, their fur matted with crimson. When they shifted back, their human forms were no less imposing, sweat-slick and raw from battle. Gideon's gaze sought Amelie instantly, his expression unreadable. Rourke's voice cut through the silence. We saw what she did. We felt it. That power doesn't belong to us, it belongs to Gunnar. And we're fools if we let her stay here another day. Murmurs rose from the pack. Fear. Agreement. Amelie's chest tightened until she could barely breathe. It wasn't Gunnar, she whispered hoarsely. It was me. That's what makes it worse, Rourke snarled. You don't even understand what you are. Gideon stepped between them, his voice low, dangerous. Enough. But the damage was done. The bond Amelie had felt, real, undeniable, was now a weapon turned against her. That night, she sat alone in her chamber, staring at her trembling hands. She remembered the heat of their wolves, the surge of power when she had touched it. The moon goddess's words rang in her mind. Two shadows guard your path. Only together will they make you whole. The twins. Gideon and Rourke. The bond was real. It terrified her, but it also burned inside her with a certainty she could not ignore. She closed her eyes, pressing her palm to her scar. What am I? She whispered into the darkness. No answer came. Only the echo of wolves in the walls, and the knowledge that the bond she had awakened would either save them all, or destroy everything. Episode 9, A Past That Haunts. Ironfang smelled of blood and smoke long after the battle ended. The rogues' corpses had been burned, their ashes scattered in the forest beyond the walls, but the stench clung stubbornly to every stone. The pack tried to go on, repairing the broken gates, tending to their wounded, but an unease simmered beneath the surface. It was Amelie's fault. At least, that was the whisper. She felt it in every turn back, every suspicious glance. Warriors who had once offered her food now passed her in silence. Mothers clutched their pups closer when she walked by. Even the healers hesitated when she entered their hut, as though her very presence might sour their poultices. Rourke fed the fire of their fear. He made no effort to hide his contempt, his voice sharp with accusation whenever she was near. She draws the rogues like flies to rot. It's no coincidence they attacked so soon after she arrived. Gideon rarely answered him, but the silence between the twins grew heavier each day. And though Amelie wanted to believe Gideon stood with her, she could see the doubt shadowing his golden eyes. She was alone again, just as she had always been. Her dreams grew darker. Every night, she woke gasping, drenched in sweat, the scar on her chest burning like molten silver. Shadows haunted her, long corridors slick with blood, chains clattering in the dark, the low growl of Alpha Gunnar's wolf echoing from somewhere she could not see. But worse than the shadows were the glimpses of light. A woman's voice, soft and desperate, calling her name. A man's laughter, deep and warm, cut short by a snarl and a scream. Her parents. She had no memory of them, at least, none she trusted. Gunnar had taken her too young, filling her head with lies and fear until she barely knew who she had been before. But now, the fragments returned unbidden, sharper with each dream. She saw a woman with hair like moonlight, arms outstretched as she shielded a child. A man with silver eyes, standing his ground against a wolf larger and darker than night. She saw blood. And she saw herself, small and terrified, dragged into the shadows while her parents' screams echoed behind her. When she woke, she could still feel the iron bite of chains against her wrists. One night, unable to bear the weight of the memories alone, she slipped from her chamber and wandered the silent halls. The torches burned low, throwing long shadows across the stone. She found Gideon in the training yard, shirtless despite the cold, his body slick with sweat as he struck at a wooden dummy with merciless precision. His knuckles bled, but he didn't stop until the wood splintered beneath his fists. When he finally turned, his gaze found her instantly. For a moment, the hard lines of his face softened. "You shouldn't be out here." "Neither should you," she murmured. He didn't answer, only picked up a cloth and wiped the blood from his hands. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Do you ever remember things you wish you didn't?" His eyes flicked to her, sharp and assessing. "Why?" "Because I'm starting to." Her voice shook despite her effort to steady it. "I see them, Gideon. My parents. I hear their voices. And I see him. Gunnar. I see the night he took me." The cloth stilled in his hand. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "Dreams can be dangerous, Amelie. Sometimes they're only ghosts. Sometimes they're truths we're not ready to face." Her chest tightened. "And how do you know which is which?" His gaze held hers, unflinching. "You don't. Not until it's too late." The next attack came not from rogues, but from within. It was during the evening meal, the great hall crowded with weary warriors and their families. Amelie sat at the far end of the table, picking at her food while the others spoke in low tones. A voice cut through the din, harsh and cold. "She doesn't belong here." Rourke stood at the center of the hall, his glare fixed on her. "How many more must die before you see it?" "She is a curse on Iron Fang." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others looked away. Gideon rose slowly, his presence commanding silence. "Enough." But Rourke didn't yield. His voice rose, edged with fury. "You saw it yourself, brother. That light. That power. It wasn't ours. It wasn't human. It wasn't wolf. It was hers. And it nearly tore us apart." All eyes turned to her. Amelie's hands trembled, but she forced herself to stand. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I didn't ask to be taken, or cursed, or hunted. If my being here endangers you, then I'll go." The hall fell silent. Gideon's jaw clenched. No one leaves Iron Fang unprotected. "Maybe that's the problem," Rourke spat. "Maybe she should." Before Gideon could answer, the sound of horns split the air. The call from the northern watchtower. An intruder. Chaos erupted as warriors leapt to their feet, grabbing weapons and rushing for the gates. Amelie followed, heart pounding. In the flickering torchlight beyond the walls, a lone figure staggered from the trees. He was covered in blood, his clothes torn, his face hidden beneath a hood. When the guard seized him, he raised his head, and Amelie's breath caught in her throat. She knew him. Not from Iron Fang, not from her life with Gunnar, but from her dreams. The silver eyes. The strong jaw. The face of the man who had stood beside her mother on the night of fire and blood. Her father. Or the ghost of him. She collapsed that night into dreams darker than ever. She saw it all again, the home hidden deep in the forest, the warmth of her parents' embrace, the sudden crash of claws and teeth as Gunnar's wolves descended. She saw her father fall, his body torn apart before her eyes. She saw her mother scream, her blood painting the walls as she tried to protect her child. And she saw herself, small and helpless, dragged into the shadows while Gunnar's hand closed around her like a shackle. When she woke, the scar burned like fire, and she knew. Her past was not gone. It had only been waiting to return. Episode 10, The Kiss Under Moonlight. The night of the full moon arrived with a sky so clear it seemed scrubbed clean by fate itself. Iron Fang had repaired its walls, reforged its gates, and healed its wounded, but beneath the surface nothing was whole. The pack bore its scars, and so did Amelie. She stood at the edge of the forest, looking out at the trees that loomed silver beneath the moonlight. Every breath she took was laced with unease, every beat of her heart quickened with dread. The whispers had not stopped. The stares had not softened. She was still an outsider, still the girl who had brought fire and blood into their lives. And tonight, with the full moon rising, she felt it more keenly than ever. Her scar burned like molten silver, pulsing in rhythm with the rise of the moon. It was as if something within her answered a call she could not resist. Behind her, footsteps crunched softly against the frost-hardened ground. Gideon. She didn't need to turn to know, it was always him. His presence was like gravity, steady and undeniable, drawing her even when she wanted to flee. You shouldn't be out here alone. His voice was low, carrying the weight of command but gentled by something he rarely let anyone hear. Amelie wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the tree-line. I can't stay in there. Not when they look at me like I'm a curse. There was a long silence. Then Gideon stepped closer, the warmth of him brushing against her cold skin. You're not a curse. She turned to him, searching his face. His golden eyes reflected the moonlight, sharp and unyielding, but beneath them she caught a flicker of something else. Something softer. Something dangerous. Then what am I? She whispered. For a heartbeat, his mask slipped. Mine. The word hung between them, raw and unguarded, before Gideon's jaw tightened as if he regretted it. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. Forget I said that. But Amelie couldn't. The word burned brighter than the scar across her chest. The call came suddenly, a howl from the southern watchtower. Rogues again. But this time, Amelie felt it before she heard it. A pull in her blood, a warning in her bones. The attack wasn't random. It was for her. The warriors mobilized, racing through the gates, weapons drawn. Gideon and Rourke led the charge, twin shadows slicing through the night with lethal precision. Amelie followed despite herself, the pull in her chest stronger than fear. The rogues swarmed the forest edge, eyes glinting red, jaws snapping with feral hunger. But among them stood a figure taller, darker, a wolf cloaked in shadows, its growl vibrating the ground itself. Gunnar. Her blood turned to ice. He had found her. The battle was chaos, fangs against steel, blood soaking the frozen ground. Gideon fought like fire, every strike of his blade fueled by fury. Rourke was a storm, tearing through enemies with ruthless efficiency. But the rogues kept coming, drawn by something stronger than instinct. Drawn to her. Amelie tried to stay back, but the shadow wolf's gaze locked onto her, and her scar ignited with unbearable pain. She screamed, falling to her knees, clutching her chest as light burst beneath her skin. The same light as before. The same power that had torn through the battlefield. Gunnar snarled, his voice echoing in her head like a curse. You are mine, little wolf. You always were. She choked on the words, the pain consuming her. But through the haze, Gideon's voice broke through, rough, desperate. Amelie. Look at me. She lifted her gaze, tears blurring her vision. Gideon was there, fighting his way to her, blood streaking his arms, his chest rising with ragged breaths. His eyes burned not with fear, but with determination. You are not his, he growled, as if sheer will could shatter Gunnar's claim. You are ours. You are mine. Something inside her broke. Or perhaps it mended. She didn't know. She only knew that the light shifted, no longer wild and uncontrollable, but steady, drawn toward him. Toward Gideon. The rogues fell back, howling as if blinded by the sudden surge of power. Gunnar snarled, retreating into the shadows with promises of return. The battlefield stilled. Amelie stood trembling, the light fading from her skin, her body racked with exhaustion. She swayed, and before she could fall, Gideon's arms were around her, strong and unyielding. For a long moment, they said nothing. The only sound was their ragged breathing, their hearts beating in frantic unison. Then she looked up, and he was already watching her. The world seemed to narrow, everything else fading into silence, the blood, the pain, the danger. There was only him. The pull between them stronger than fear, stronger than fate. She didn't know who moved first. Maybe it was him, maybe it was her. But suddenly his lips were on hers, fierce and desperate, a promise and a plea all at once. The kiss was fire and moonlight, burning through the darkness, binding them with a force older than either of them understood. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Gideon pressed his forehead to hers. "You are not alone," he whispered. "Not anymore." And for the first time since the night of chains and blood, Amelie believed it. Episode 11, The Betrayal Within. The full moon had set, but the silver in the sky still clung to the world like an omen. Ironfang's courtyard bore the scars of the battle, stones stained with blood, shattered arrows lodged in the ground, the bitter scent of ash lingering long after the fires had died. The wolves moved quietly, repairing walls, tending wounds, burying their dead. But though the pack had won the night, there was no cheer, no sense of triumph. Instead, suspicion coiled through the ranks like smoke. And at the center of it stood Amelie. She had kissed Gideon under the moonlight, felt fate itself burn between them, but when the dawn came, whispers began. Warriors spoke of how she had glowed like the moon's chosen, how Gunnar's voice had called to her as if she belonged to him. "She's cursed," one muttered near the well. "She'll bring him back again," another answered. "She's his." The words cut deeper than blades. Amelie sat alone near the training field, her knees drawn to her chest, her scar hidden beneath her sleeve. The mark still burned faintly, a cruel reminder of chains and blood. She could still feel Gideon's kiss, still hear the vow in his voice, but against the weight of the pack's doubt, it felt fragile. A shadow passed over her. Rourke. He stood with arms crossed, his gaze unreadable, but she could feel the storm beneath his skin. She hadn't spoken to him since the battle, since he had seen her in Gideon's arms. "You should be careful," he said finally, his tone colder than she expected. "Careful of what?" she whispered. "Of giving your heart too easily. Some things burn bright and then burn out." The words landed like a strike. She wanted to ask what he meant, but Rourke was already walking away, leaving her with silence and the hollow ache of doubt. That night, the council fires were lit, and Ironfang gathered to discuss the growing threat. Gideon stood tall, his voice cutting through the night. "Gunnar will not stop. He wants her, and he will burn the world until he gets her. We must be ready." Murmurs rippled. Some nodded, but others looked at Amelie with thinly veiled distrust. Then Elder Hakon, his fur streaked with gray, rose. "And what if it is she who brings him to our gates? She bears his mark. She carries his oath." Amelie's chest tightened. "I never chose it," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I was a child. He cut me, forced my blood." "Blood is binding," the elder snapped. "Oath or no, it ties you to him. And to deny that bond is to invite ruin." The pack's murmurs grew louder. Doubt spread like wildfire. Gideon snarled, slamming his hand against the stone table. "Enough. She is not his. She is under my protection, under ours." But for every wolf who met Gideon's gaze with loyalty, another looked away, their silence heavy with mistrust. That night, Amelie dreamed of chains. She saw herself at 8 years old, wrists bound, scar burning as Gunnar's knife drew blood. She heard his voice whisper against her ear, "Your life for my sons. Your blood for my legacy." When she woke, her scar was glowing faintly, and a whisper lingered in her mind. Soon. The next day, the betrayal began. It started small, food missing from the stores, gates left unlatched, strange scents near the watchtowers. Gideon doubled the patrols, Rourke interrogated the guards, but no answers came. And then, at dusk, the gates opened without command. Rogues poured in. The courtyard erupted into chaos, wolves shifting mid-stride, blades clashing against claws. Amelie was shoved back by the press of bodies, her scar blazing like fire. She knew this attack wasn't about the pack, it was about her. Through the madness, she saw him. Not Gunnar, but his emissary, a wolf cloaked in bone and ash, eyes like burning coals. "Blood for blood," he growled, stalking toward her. Before she could run, strong hands seized her from behind, clamping over her mouth. Not a rogue. A wolf of Ironfang. Her blood froze. The scent was familiar. She twisted, fighting against the grip, and her gaze met the betrayer's face. Kara. One of the healers. The same woman who had tended her wounds after the fire, who had smiled kindly, who had promised she was safe here. Don't fight, Kara hissed, dragging her toward the open gate. This is the only way to save us. Give him what he wants, and Iron Fang will live. Amelie's scream was muffled, her nails clawing against Kara's arms. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound. But before the gate swallowed her, a snarl split the air. Gideon. His blade caught the moonlight as he struck, severing Kara's hold. Amelie stumbled free, gasping for air, as Gideon's fury lit the night. You dare. His voice was pure fire. Kara bared her teeth. I dare for the pack. She's death walking. You'd risk us all for her. The fight was brutal. Kara was swift, trained in more than herbs, her strikes aimed to kill. But Gideon was relentless, his rage a storm. In the end, Kara fell to the stones, her blood staining the courtyard she had once healed. The rogues fled at the sight, their emissary retreating into the shadows, his laughter echoing like a promise. When the dust settled, the pack stared at Kara's body, silence heavy as stone. Amelie stood trembling, the weight of betrayal pressing down like chains. Gideon turned to her, blood on his hands, his voice rough but steady. No one will take you from me. Rourke appeared then, his eyes dark, his jaw tight. He looked at Amelie, then at Gideon, and for a moment, something unspoken flickered between them, anger, jealousy, grief. Amelie couldn't bear it. She fled into the night, the scar on her chest pulsing with every step. And though the battle was over, she knew the true war had only begun. Because betrayal wasn't just at the gates. It was within. Episode 12, Scar's Secret. The night after Kara's betrayal, Iron Fang was silent. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of unease, the kind that pressed down on chests and made every wolf glance twice over their shoulder. The gates were barred, the watch doubled, but trust was broken. If one healer could betray them, who else might? And at the heart of that suspicion stood Amelie. She sat alone in the healer's hut, the irony bitter on her tongue. They had placed her here, under guard, as though the very walls could keep out the whispers. Her fingers traced the scar beneath her tunic, the mark that had begun to throb with a strange, heated pulse since Kara's attack. It glowed faintly, lines spreading outward like roots, curling in shapes she didn't understand. Not just a scar. A symbol. She flinched as the door creaked. Gideon entered, his face hard from command, but his eyes softened when they landed on her. You should rest, he said. I can't. Her voice was low. It burns, Gideon. It's not just a scar anymore. Something's waking inside me. He came closer, kneeling, his hand hovering near her shoulder as though he wanted to touch but feared to hurt her. Then we'll find out what it is. Whatever binds you, we'll break it. She wanted to believe him. But a shadow moved in the doorway before she could answer. Rourke. His expression was unreadable, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on the faint glow beneath her tunic. Or maybe it's not meant to be broken. The words hung heavy. Don't, Gideon snapped, rising. Not now. But Rourke's gaze stayed on her. We keep fighting for her, bleeding for her, but we don't even know what she is. What if Kara wasn't wrong? Amelie's chest tightened. You think I'm cursed? I think, Rourke said slowly, that you're hiding something. Maybe not by choice. But something inside you is keeping secrets. And he wasn't wrong. That night, the dreams returned. She was small again, 8 years old, knees bruised from stone, wrists bound in chains too heavy for a child. Gunner's hand clamped on her shoulder, forcing her still as another figure approached. Not Tyson. Not Gunner. A robed stranger, face hidden, voice like smoke. The girl is strong. She will hold it. I only care that she's bound, Gunner growled. My son will have her, and through her, the packs will kneel. The stranger's knife gleamed, silver runes etched into its blade. He drew it across her chest, and the pain was worse than fire. Her blood spilled, but it didn't fall to the earth, it was caught in a bowl, mixed with something black and ancient. The stranger whispered words she could not understand, but they carved themselves into her flesh, shaping the scar she bore to this day. A vessel. A mark. A prison. Her eyes flew open with a scream, the memory snapping into clarity. The scar was not just a bond to Tyson. It was a seal. The next day, the truth bled through. While sparring in the yard, she stumbled, the scar flaring suddenly bright. Power surged outward, knocking Gideon back, sending weapons clattering across stone. Wolves froze, eyes wide with fear. What was that? One whispered. She's dangerous, another hissed. Amelie staggered, clutching her chest, but the glow only spread, branching like veins of silver fire beneath her skin. She could hear whispers, not in the air, but in her mind. Ancient voices, layered and echoing. Release. 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 Rourke stepped forward, blade drawn, his expression torn between fear and fury. Tell us what you are, Amelie. Now. Her breath shook. She wanted to deny it, but the memory was too sharp, the truth undeniable. They made me into something, she said. Her voice broke. Not just Gunnar. Someone else. A stranger with the council's seal on his robes. My blood was twisted. This scar isn't only a blood oath. It's a container. I was meant to hold something, something ancient. Gasps rippled through the wolves. A vessel. A curse. A weapon. Council. Gideon echoed, disbelief in his voice. But Amelie nodded, tears streaming. It wasn't just Gunnar. The council was there. They put this inside me. The pack erupted into chaos, voices clashing, fear spreading like fire. She's a danger. She's a weapon. She's ours to protect. The noise was unbearable. And then the scar broke. The power ripped free like lightning, silver fire arcing across the yard. Wolves were thrown back, walls cracked, the ground split. Amelie screamed, but it was not her voice alone, it was layered, ancient, a chorus of something trapped inside her. The sky darkened though no clouds had come. Shadows bent toward her, and for a moment she swore she saw a face in the glow, eyes like voids, mouth curved in a cruel smile. The seal was breaking. Gideon fought through the storm, gripping her shoulders, shouting her name. Amelie. Stay with me. Fight it. She gasped, struggling, clinging to the sound of his voice. Rourke was there too, his hand on her arm, grounding her despite his fear. And with their touch, the storm faltered, the glow dimming until she collapsed, unconscious. When she woke, the hut was quiet. Gideon sat at her side, exhaustion etched into his face. Rourke stood in the corner, arms folded, eyes shadowed. You should have told us, Rourke said flatly. I didn't remember, she whispered. Or maybe you didn't want to, he shot back. Enough, Gideon snapped, but Amelie's chest ached. Rourke's words weren't just anger, they were fear. Before she could answer, a new voice came from the doorway. Elder Hacken. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he held out a fragment of parchment. I know what she is, he said. I've seen this seal before. It's not just a bond. It's an anchor. The council didn't mark her for Gunnar. They marked her for something far worse. He laid the parchment down. The rune etched there was identical to the scar over Amelie's heart. And beneath it, a single word translated from the old tongue. Vessel. Episode 13, The Enemy's Return. The night after the scar's eruption, Iron Fang did not sleep. The wolves worked silently to repair the shattered yard, hauling stones back into place, patching the cracked walls. Every crash of rock against rock carried the weight of unspoken dread. The warriors avoided Amelie's eyes, though many cast furtive glances toward the healer's hut where she lay under watch. Some looks brimmed with fear. Others with awe. And some, darker still, with envy. Amelie could feel it all, even behind the closed door. The scar was quiet now, but she knew it was not gone. The faint silver glow pulsed just beneath her skin, waiting. Her fingers trembled as they traced the mark. Vessel, she whispered, the word Elder Hakon had revealed still cutting deeper than any blade. Gideon sat beside her, his hand firm on hers. His presence steadied her, but his jaw was clenched tight, his shoulders rigid. He had led warriors into battle countless times, yet even he did not know how to fight an enemy that lived beneath her skin. Rourke leaned against the far wall, his eyes sharp as knives. His voice was low, edged with accusation. We all felt it, Amelie. That power wasn't yours, it was something else. Something using you. She flinched, though she could not deny it. Gideon snapped, she isn't the enemy. Not yet, Rourke countered, but tell me, brother, what happens when that thing inside her wakes fully? What if the council made her to break us from within? The word stung because Amelie had asked herself the same question. Before Gideon could retort, a horn blared from the watchtower. The sound was long and low, rolling like thunder across the valley. Enemy at the gates. The fortress erupted into motion. Wolves rushed to the walls, archers loaded quivers, and the heavy gates groaned as chains locked them in place. Amelie stumbled after Gideon and Rourke as they sprinted into the courtyard. Warriors gathered at the battlements, growls rumbling through the night. And then she saw them. Torches burned against the tree-line, carried by figures in blood-claw red. But they were not alone. At their head stood robed figures, their hoods concealing faces, staffs tipped with crackling runes. The council's emissaries. Her stomach dropped. They've allied, Gideon snarled. Blood Claw and the council. The enemy formation stretched wide, 100 strong. Wolves snarled and shifted in the shadows, muscles rippling, eyes gleaming yellow and crimson. The council's magi stood like pillars among them, their staffs humming with restrained power. And at the very front, mounted on a black steed, sat a figure Amelie thought she'd escaped forever. Tyson. Her promised mate. Alive. Her chest seized as memories flooded, his cruel smile, his hand forcing hers into blood, the way his laughter followed her nightmares. But he was changed. His face bore new scars, his eyes burned darker, touched by something unnatural. He raised his sword, and the enemy host roared. Iron Fang. Gideon's voice cut through the rising fear. He climbed the wall, his presence commanding. Tonight they test our gates. Tonight they learn Iron Fang does not kneel. The wolves howled an answer, but Amelie's heart hammered too fast. Tyson's gaze swept the wall and locked on her. Even across the distance, she felt the bond tug, thin, poison threads woven by the blood oath. Mine, his voice echoed inside her skull. Not shouted, but whispered directly into her mind. You were marked for me. Vessel or not, you will return. She staggered, clutching the scar. Gideon's arm caught her before she fell. What is it? It's him, she gasped. He's in my head. The first assault came swift. Blood Claw wolves surged forward, claws glinting, bodies colliding with Iron Fang's defenses. Arrows rained, piercing fur and flesh. Steel clashed on stone as ladders slammed against the walls. Amelie's pulse roared with every strike. She wanted to fight, to stand, but the scar flared again, threads of light lacing up her neck. She could feel the council magi across the battlefield pulling at her, whispering in forgotten tongues. They weren't here to destroy Iron Fang. They were here to awaken her. A searing pain ripped through her chest, and for a moment she wasn't standing on the battlements, she was inside a cavern of shadows, the voices around her rising like 1,000 serpents. Release. 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 She screamed, falling to her knees. Amelie. Gideon's shout was raw. He crouched, shielding her from arrows, his eyes desperate. Stay with me. Fight it. Rourke cut down an enemy climbing the wall and snarled, she's drawing them. They're not here for Iron Fang, they're here for her. Down below, Tyson dismounted, his gaze never leaving her. He raised his hand, and the magi beside him planted their staffs. The ground trembled as silver light shot skyward, a mirror of her own scar's glow. Amelie gasped. The pull between them tightened, nearly dragging her off the wall. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Amelie, what are they doing? Gideon demanded. They're calling it, she choked. Calling what's inside me. The scar blazed, veins of silver fire crawling across her body. The world tilted, the noise of battle fading beneath the pounding in her skull. And then a voice deeper than all others spoke through her. Child. Vessel. I am returning. Panic erupted along the wall. Wolves backed away from her, torn between fear and loyalty. Some raised weapons. Some pleaded for her to fight. Hold her steady. Gideon barked, gripping her tighter. She is not the enemy. She's the key they want. Rourke shouted back, his blade drawn, torn between brother and instinct. If we don't stop this now. But his words drowned beneath a deafening crack. The gates shuddered as a massive blast struck them, the wood splintering. Blood Claw warriors surged, forcing the iron barrier inward. Amelie's body convulsed as the scar split open, not bleeding but burning with light. The rune etched into her chest shone brighter than the moon itself. The vessel was awakening. And then, through the chaos, Tyson's voice rang clear. Come to me, Amelie. The bond yanked, nearly tearing her apart. She felt herself rising, her body not entirely her own, drawn toward him like a moth to flame. But then, hands anchored her. Gideon's, rough and warm, gripping hers with feral strength. Rourke's, seizing her other arm, his growl low and pained. You don't belong to him, Gideon roared. You're ours, Rourke snarled. And for the first time, their voices drowned out Tyson's. The scar flickered, the pole wavering. Amelie gasped, collapsing back against them, the glow dimming. Tyson's roar of rage shook the battlefield, and with a final bellow, the Blood Claw forces retreated into the tree line, dragging their dead with them. The Magi vanished like smoke. The gates held, but only barely. Iron Fang had survived the night. For now. When silence fell, the wolves stared at her, not just as a survivor, not just as a stranger, but as the reason their enemies had come. Some eyes gleamed with loyalty. Some with doubt. And Amelie, trembling between Gideon and Rourke, knew the truth in her bones. Tyson was back. The council had chosen her as a vessel. And whatever ancient thing lived inside her, was waking. Episode 14, Bound in Blood. The night after the siege was quiet, but it was not peace. The fortress still smoked from broken torches, the scent of iron and wolf blood staining the air. The dead had been carried away, their bodies laid in the shadow of the mountain, where mourners' howls echoed against the stone. The wounded groaned in the healers' tents, and the walls bore fresh scars where magic had struck. Iron Fang had survived, but the pack was shaken. And in the center of their unease stood Amelie. She felt every stare as she walked through the courtyard the next morning, Gideon at her side, Rourke a step behind like a shadow with a blade. Warriors shifted aside when she passed, their eyes wary, voices dropping to murmurs. Did you see it last night? The light. She was glowing like a star. Not a star. A curse. She's the reason Blood Claw came. The words pierced deeper than arrows. Amelie kept her head down, her scar hidden beneath a cloak, but no cloth could hide what she was now. Not just a runaway. Not just a maid bound by blood. A vessel. When they reached the council chamber, Elder Hacken and the other lieutenants of Iron Fang waited. The air was thick with tension. We must speak plainly, one warrior declared, slamming a fist on the table. Our gates nearly fell last night. Not because of numbers, but because of her. The council wants her. Blood Claw wants her. Keeping her here endangers us all. She is not the enemy, Gideon growled. She is under our protection. The warrior sneered. Until she loses control and destroys us from within. Rourke's lip curled, his hand twitching toward his blade. Say that again, and you'll have more to fear than her. Enough, Elder Hacken cut in. His eyes, clouded with age yet sharp as ever, fixed on Amelie. We must decide what role she plays in this war. She cannot remain untrained, unbound. Not when forces beyond our understanding reach for her. Amelie swallowed. You mean the scar? No, Hakan said quietly. I mean the blood. Later, when the chamber emptied, Gideon shut the door with a slam. His fists were clenched, his body trembling with the restraint of barely contained rage. They speak as if you are a weapon, not a woman, he spat. Amelie touched his arm gently. Maybe they're not wrong. His eyes flashed, hurt cutting through his anger. Don't say that. You are not what they fear. You're stronger than it. He stopped, his jaw tight, words unsaid heavy in the air. Rourke leaned against the wall, arms crossed. He's not wrong. But neither are they. You carry something inside you none of us can fight. If the council calls it again, if Tyson calls you again. Her stomach twisted. Then bind me, she whispered. Both brothers froze. What? Gideon asked. Amelie forced herself to meet their eyes, even as her pulse raced. I know the blood oath Tyson forced on me as a child. I can still feel it. That's how he reached me last night. But maybe it can be broken. Rewritten. If I'm bound to someone else instead, the tether to him might weaken. Rourke's eyes narrowed. You mean blood binding? Amelie nodded. Yes. Gideon's breath caught. That ritual, it isn't done lightly. It forges more than protection. It's permanent. I know, she said softly. Silence stretched, the weight of her words filling the chamber like storm clouds. That night, the ritual began. They led her deep into Ironfang's heart, into a cavern carved from black stone. Torches burned blue here, their flames enchanted, the air humming with old magic. A circle had been inscribed on the ground, runes etched with silver powder that glowed faintly beneath the light. Elder Hakan oversaw the rite, his voice solemn. A blood binding is not a shield one can discard. It ties soul to soul, spirit to spirit. It is choice made eternal. Amelie's hands shook, but she held them steady. Then let it be eternal. I won't be Tyson's anymore. Hakan's eyes drifted to Gideon and Rourke. But who among you will bear this bond? The vessel cannot bind to both. The ritual demands one. The chamber went still. The brothers' gazes collided, twin storms. Gideon's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. Rourke's eyes burned, his chest rising with restrained fury. Amelie's heart raced. She wanted to speak, to decide, but her voice stuck in her throat. Finally, Gideon stepped forward. It will be me. No, Rourke's voice was ice. He strode forward, squaring himself against his brother. She needs strength, not sentiment. If Tyson comes again, if the council rips at her soul, you won't hold. I will. Enough, Gideon snapped. You think this is about strength? It's about trust. She trusts me. She doesn't need trust, Rourke growled, stepping closer. She needs survival. The tension crackled like lightning. Amelie's voice broke through, trembling but firm. Stop. Please. They froze, both turning to her. Her eyes glistened. This isn't about which of you is stronger, or who I trust more. It's about breaking chains that have bound me since I was a child. It's about freedom. If either of you will carry that with me, then let it be by my choice, not your battle. Her gaze shifted between them, torn, desperate. I choose. Before the words could leave her lips, the scar ignited. Pain seared through her body, throwing her to her knees. The runes on the floor flared, reacting violently, silver sparks hissing in the air. Elder Hakan shouted, weaving words to contain it, but the energy writhed like a living thing. And then a voice thundered inside her skull. You cannot break what is mine. Tyson. The bond to him tightened like a noose, choking her. Her blood boiled, her scar blazing white-hot as if it would split her in half. She screamed, collapsing in the circle. The brothers fell to their knees beside her. Gideon grasped her hand, his voice hoarse. Stay with me, Amelie. Don't let him take you. Rourke gripped her shoulder, his growl low and desperate. Fight him. You're not his anymore. But Tyson's voice only grew louder, cruel and possessive. Mine. Bound in blood. You can never choose another. Amelie's vision blurred, silver fire tearing at her veins. The circle trembled, the runes shattering beneath the force of the bond. Elder Hakon shouted, "The ritual cannot hold while his mark remains. One of you must bleed for her now, bind her with will stronger than his." Without hesitation, Gideon slashed his palm, pressing it to hers. Blood mingled, searing hot between them. "You are mine, Amelie. By choice, by love, by bond. No oath of his will ever claim you again." The scar flared, fighting, resisting, until Rourke seized her other hand and cut his palm too, forcing it against hers. "You're not his. You're ours. Whatever comes, we face it together." Her body convulsed, caught between two bindings, two forces colliding. The scar split open, light spilling like molten silver. The cavern shook, the air cracking with power. And then, silence. The light dimmed, the pain ebbing. When Amelie opened her eyes, she lay in the circle, both Gideon and Rourke kneeling beside her, their blood mingled with hers on the stone. The scar was still there. But something had changed. The tether to Tyson was weaker, frayed. But in its place, another had formed. Not to one brother. To both. The ritual chamber was hushed, every wolf present staring in awe and fear. Elder Hakon's voice was grave. "This should be impossible. No vessel has ever borne two bonds." And yet, his gaze swept over the three of them. "Bound in blood, you are no longer hers, nor she yours. You are one. A triad." The words struck the air like a bell. Amelie's breath trembled. The warmth of their touch lingered in her blood, in her bones. She could feel them both now, Gideon's steady strength, Rourke's fierce fire, woven into her like threads of the same fabric. She had broken Tyson's chain. But at what cost? Because in binding herself to both, she had created something new. Something that should not exist. And somewhere, far beyond the mountain, Tyson felt it. His scream of rage split the night, carried by the wind. Episode 15, Losses in the Dark. The cavern smelled of blood and burnt stone. Hours had passed since the ritual, yet the silver runes still glowed faintly, refusing to fade, as though the earth itself remembered what had been done. Wolves stood silent in the chamber's shadows, their faces unreadable masks, some of awe, some of horror. Amelie felt the weight of every stare. Her palms still tingled where Gideon's and Rourke's blood had mingled with hers, where something irreversible had taken root inside her. She felt them both now, not just beside her, but within. Their heartbeats thrummed faintly beneath her ribs, their breath brushing the edges of her mind. Bound in blood. To two alphas. A triad that should never have existed. And as Elder Hakon had whispered in dread. What should not exist, rarely ends without cost. The pack whispered louder as she left the chamber. Two bonds. Unnatural. She's cursed, I said so. No wolf survives such a tie. It will destroy us all. Gideon bared his teeth at them, his fury barely contained. Say one more word against her, and it's your blood staining this floor. But Rourke's silence was heavier than rage. His eyes were storm-dark, flicking constantly between Amelie and his brother, as though gauging whether the bond they now shared would hold, or tear them apart. That night, Ironfang gathered in the courtyard for the mourning of their dead. The pyres burned high, their flames reaching for the stars, sparks drifting like lost souls. Wolves howled one by one, voices trembling with grief, calling the names of the fallen. Among the dead was Kaelin, one of Gideon's oldest comrades, a warrior who had fought beside him since their first hunts. Gideon stood stiff as stone at the pyre, his jaw locked, his fists clenched. Only the tremor in his shoulders betrayed him. Amelie reached for him, but he stepped away. Not from her. But from himself. Rourke stood at the edge of the firelight, his face carved from shadow. He did not howl. He only watched the flames devour the body of another he had once called brother, silent as if grief was a language he refused to speak. For the first time since she had joined them, Amelie realized, loss here was not an idea. It was a living wound. And this war was only beginning. The council's messengers arrived before dawn. 3 cloaked figures at the gates, their insignia glinting silver. Their message was simple, carved into a wax seal. Deliver the vessel. Or face annihilation. Ironfang's lieutenants gathered in the hall, their voices sharp and venomous. We cannot hand her over. She is ours. She is poison. If we do not yield her, we will all burn. She has already bound 2 of our own leaders. She has undone laws older than our pack. Enough. Elder Hakon's voice silenced them all. His eyes fell on Amelie. The council will not stop. Nor will Tyson. You cannot remain here. Already, our walls bleed. Already, our brothers fall. The truth of it stung sharper than claws. Because even as they argued, Ironfang's warriors dragged in 2 more bodies from the northern patrol. Slain. Torn apart. The enemy had not retreated, they were circling, waiting, thinning Ironfang's strength night by night. Loss is in the dark. That evening, the triad bond flared for the first time. Amelie woke in her chamber with a scream, clutching her scar as pain knifed through her chest. Her vision swam, not hers, but Gideon's. He was outside the northern wall, sword dripping with blood, 3 enemy scouts at his feet. His breath came ragged, his hand cut deep. The bond seared with his pain, spilling into her veins like fire. And then another vision overlaid it, Rourke, in the southern woods, facing a pack of shadowed figures. His blade flashed in the dark, but his snarl carried the strain of exhaustion. His fury coursed through her, hot and violent, making her gasp for air. 2 battles. 2 brothers. 1 vessel. Her body could not contain it. Her veins burned with their fury, their grief, their wounds. She staggered, her scream shattering the silence of the keep. When they both returned, bloodied but alive, she collapsed into their arms. The bond had nearly ripped her apart. Elder Hakon's words came back to haunt her. What should not exist rarely ends without cost. The first betrayal struck 2 nights later. Amelie woke to the sound of steel. She turned to find one of Ironfang's own guards at her bedside, dagger raised, eyes wild. Forgive me, he whispered. But if you live, we all die. The blade descended. And was caught in Rourke's hand, his grip crushing the assassin's wrist until bone snapped. With a roar, Gideon slammed the traitor against the wall, teeth bared inches from his throat. Why? Gideon's voice was venom. Why betray your oath? Tears streaked the guard's face. Because I buried my son yesterday. Because every night, another brother dies. And all because of her. His gaze flicked to Amelie, full of grief and loathing. She is death walking. And you are blind. Gideon's snarl deepened. 1 move and the man would die. But Amelie's voice broke the silence. Let him go. Both brothers turned in disbelief. He's not wrong, she whispered. His son is dead because of me. Because of what haunts me. Killing him won't bring him back. It will only prove their fears true. Her hands trembled, but her words held. Let him live. Let him hate me. If hate keeps this pack standing, then let it burn. Reluctantly, Gideon released the man. The guard fled into the night, leaving only silence behind. But Amelie knew this would not be the last betrayal. The next raid came in darkness. Ironfang's sentries fell without a sound, their bodies dragged into the trees. Shadows slipped through the gates, torches snuffed before flames could rise. By the time the alarm rang, blood already stained the stones. Amelie fought beside Gideon and Rourke, her scar blazing, silver fire bursting from her hands against the attackers. But each blast left her weaker, the triad bond draining her with every heartbeat. Wolves fell around her, brothers, sisters, warriors whose names she barely knew but whose screams would haunt her forever. And then, Kaelin's younger brother, barely 16, was struck down before her eyes. The boy who had once shyly offered her bread in the courtyard. She screamed his name, too late. The enemy slipped back into the trees, leaving Ironfang bloodied and broken. When dawn rose, the courtyard was a grave. That morning, the wolves howled again. For the young. For the fallen. For losses in the dark. And Amelie stood among them, the bond to Gideon and Rourke heavy in her veins, her chest aching with grief that was not only hers but theirs, shared threefold. She had broken Tyson's chain. But freedom had come with a price. Every night now, Iron Fang bled for her. Every death weighed heavier than the last. And as she stared at the smoke rising from the pyres, Amelie knew with a sick certainty. The losses had only just begun. Episode 16, The Goddess's Test. The night swallowed her whole. One moment Amelie sat between Gideon's restless pacing and Rourke's silent vigil at the window, the tension of recent battles pressing like a storm. The next, her scar flared white-hot. A cry caught in her throat as her body collapsed. She never hit the floor. Darkness claimed her, dragging her into a place that was not the waking world. When her eyes opened, she was standing in a sea of silver sand. Above her stretched a sky neither night nor day, the moon so close it seemed to breathe. Her footsteps made no sound. The air was weightless, the horizon endless, and yet she felt she was being watched. A voice descended from everywhere at once, vibrating in her bones. You carry chains broken, and chains reforged. You bind two where one should suffice. You bleed for a bond not meant for mortal flesh. Her lips trembled. Moon Goddess. The silver dunes shifted and a figure emerged, veiled in shimmering light, face obscured, presence so vast it made her knees weaken. She had no doubt. This was her. The goddess's radiance did not comfort. Instead, it cut like cold steel. You summon me not with prayer but with arrogance. You hold what you should never hold. You love what you should never love. You defy the laws I spun into your blood. Amelie's voice cracked. I never asked for this. I never wanted. The figure lifted a hand. Her words were strangled silent. What you want is irrelevant. The fates weave. You are caught. The question is not what you seek, but what you are willing to lose. The ground split beneath her. She fell into darkness. She landed in a forest drowned in mist. Shadows pressed close. Gideon stood before her, bleeding from wounds too deep to heal. His chest heaved, his blade slick with blood. Behind him, Rourke knelt with a sword through his side, his eyes dimming as he reached weakly toward her. Both called her name. Both bled faster with every breath. The goddess's voice threaded through the trees. One life. One death. Choose. Amelie staggered forward, choking. No, don't ask me this. Gideon's voice was a rasp. Save me. You need me. Without me, you'll fall. Rourke gasped, don't waste yourself on him. I can protect you better. Her heart convulsed. She could feel both bonds unraveling, threads fraying toward nothing. Her knees hit the earth. I won't choose. Don't you understand? If they die, I die with them. Her voice cracked with raw defiance. Take me instead. The forest shattered like glass, dissolving into light. She stumbled into fire. Ironfang's courtyard burned, walls collapsing, corpses strewn across stone. Faces she knew stared lifeless at the sky. Among the flames, a boy no older than 12 stood trembling, clutching a dagger too heavy for his hands. His eyes met hers, wide, desperate. Please, he whispered. Don't let them burn. Kill me. My blood will seal the flames. Amelie's chest heaved. A dagger appeared in her hand, moonlight forged and unbearably heavy. The goddess's voice fell cold. Spill his blood, or all perish. Her hand shook violently. No. You're lying. The boy's tears cut through soot. Please, don't let them die. She dropped the blade, shaking her head furiously. I won't do it. There has to be another way. The boy's lips curled into a smile, too sharp, too cruel. His eyes turned black. You hesitate. You falter. You cannot lead. His body crumbled into ash, carried away on the firestorm. The world lurched again. She found herself in a chamber of stone, the air thick with silence. Gideon stood before her, warm hand cupping her cheek, his eyes burning with devotion. She leaned toward him, her lips trembling. The kiss never came. Steel slid into her stomach. White-hot agony. Blood spilled down her thighs. She gasped in disbelief, staring into Gideon's face as it twisted into something unrecognizable. His whisper was a dagger of its own, "You were always going to be the ruin of us." Behind him, Rourke emerged from the shadows. He did not rage. He only looked at her with hollow disappointment. "You were never worthy of us." Her knees buckled, her vision swimming with scarlet. The betrayal ripped deeper than any wound. But through the haze, something inside her burned. "This isn't real," she snarled through blood. "They would never. They would die for me. They already have. You're nothing but lies." The scar on her chest blazed. Light erupted from her body, scorching the illusions to dust. The false brothers dissolved into smoke. She stood once more beneath the endless moonlight. The goddess awaited, veils shimmering like the edge of eternity. "You defy at every turn," the divine voice murmured. "You refuse sacrifice. You reject the laws. You cling to what should be unbound." Amelie lifted her chin, though her body trembled from exhaustion. "Because they are mine. Because I am theirs. You gave us bonds. You made us wolves who love, who fight for one another. If holding to that makes me a heretic, then so be it. I won't apologize." The goddess regarded her in silence. Then, like wind shifting through leaves, something akin to curiosity stirred. "Then know this, vessel. You are no curse. No savior. You are a threshold. A door through which life may flood, or death may pour. What passes through is not my decree. It will be yours." Moonlight engulfed her. Her body jerked awake, breath ragged. She lay in her chamber, drenched in sweat. Gideon clutched her hand with desperate force, his eyes wild and bloodshot. "You've been gone 3 nights, he rasped. "We thought," his voice broke. Rourke stood in the doorway, blood still drying on his tunic, his jaw clenched. The council struck again. "We barely held the walls." "If you hadn't woken," he didn't finish. Amelie touched the scar over her heart. It pulsed steady, not burning, not searing, but alive, humming with something vast. The goddess's words echoed through her bones. "A door." She shivered, staring at the brothers who refused to let go of her hand, and wondered, when that door opened, what would step through. Episode 17, A Queen Rises. The world outside was chaos. Ironfang's walls, once carved with centuries of blood and stone, shook under the pressure of armies that should never have gathered so soon. The council had unleashed its hunters, hybrids of wolf, vampire, and witchcraft, born for one purpose only, to tear apart whatever dared resist the decrees of order. Amelie stood on the balcony of the high keep, silver moonlight washing over her like liquid fire. She could feel it now, the scar on her chest pulsing in rhythm with the beating of drums beyond the gates. Her wolf, still locked deep inside her, stirred like something half-buried clawing toward freedom. For the first time, she was not afraid of it. Behind her, Gideon was strapping his armor with trembling hands, as if fastening steel to his chest might fasten steel to his heart. Rourke leaned on the wall, sharpening a blade already dulled by too much killing, his eyes tracking every flicker of movement from her. "You're not going down there," Gideon said without turning. His voice was rough, command wrapped in desperation. Amelie didn't answer. Rourke finally spoke, low and measured. "She has to. You felt it too." The bonds shifting. The goddess left her marked. His eyes cut to her, sharp as a knife. She won't stay hidden in the shadows anymore. The council came for her. They won't stop until she faces them. Gideon spun, fury flashing. "And what? We just let her walk into their blades. You've lost your mind." Amelie's voice broke the tension like a blade slicing silk. I'm not asking your permission. They froze. The tremor in her tone wasn't fear, it was power, threaded with something that made even Gideon's fists loosen at his sides. She stepped away from them, fingers brushing the scar over her chest. For years, I was a prisoner. Gunnar chained me. The council ignored me. The goddess tested me. And every time, I survived. Her eyes burned, alive with a fire neither brother had ever seen. I will not be anyone's prisoner again. Tonight, they will learn what it means to come for me. The doors of the keep shook as the first battering ram struck. Stone dust rained from the archways. War cries howled through the night. She descended the stairs barefoot, her gown whispering against the stone, her hair streaming like a river of shadow. The triplet warriors flanked her on either side, unwilling to let her walk into death alone, but even they felt the shift in the air. It wasn't her following them anymore. They followed her. When the gates finally splintered, the council's hounds poured in. Their eyes glowed red, their fangs dripping venom, claws like iron. The defenders of Ironfang clashed, steel against magic, blood against fire. And then she stepped forward. The battlefield hushed, not by silence, but by the sheer force of her presence. Moonlight bent toward her, pooling at her feet, wreathing her in silver flames that licked but did not burn. The scar over her chest split open, light spilling through as though her very heart was a lantern. One of the hounds sneered. The cursed pup. She lifted her chin. No. The queen you were too blind to see. Her power surged outward. The earth quaked. Wolves dropped to their knees involuntarily, their bodies bowing to a dominance that did not belong to any alpha, any bloodline, any council decree. It came from something older, something holy, something terrifying. The first hound lunged, and dissolved in silver fire before his claws touched her. The battle erupted. Gideon roared, carving through enemies with feral rage, his blade drinking their lifeblood. Rourke fought like a phantom, his strikes precise, his protection always circling her like a vow unspoken. Yet no matter how they fought, it was she who turned the tide. Every wave of her hand shattered chains of spellcraft. Every cry from her throat called wolves to their feet when they would have fallen. Every step she took left glowing marks on the stone, a path lit by the moon herself. And then the council's champion appeared. He was no hound. He was a warlock draped in shadows, his form half human, half serpent, with eyes black as a starless night. His staff pulsed with the same power that had scarred her years ago. His voice slithered across the battlefield. You were never meant to rise, little wolf. You were meant to be sacrificed. Amelie's heart pounded, but she did not flinch. Then you should have killed me when you had the chance. The clash was thunder. His magic struck like storms, tearing stone from walls, sending soldiers flying. Her body convulsed under the weight of the attack, but the scar answered, spilling light so fierce it blinded even the triplets. She raised her hand, and the power did not come from outside her, it poured from within. The warlock screamed as his staff shattered, his body reduced to ash by the silver flames wrapping her. The council's hounds howled, faltering, breaking, scattering into the night. When the battlefield quieted, only the crackle of fire and the labored breaths of survivors remained. Her people, Ironfang's wolves, battered and bleeding, looked at her. Not Gideon, not Rourke. Her. And one by one, they lowered their heads, not in fear, but in reverence. Gideon stood frozen, chest heaving, eyes wide as though he no longer recognized the girl he had vowed to protect. Rourke's lips parted, the blade falling forgotten from his hand. Amelie looked up at the blood-stained moon, silver light wreathing her like a crown. Her voice was steady, fierce, unbreakable. I am no longer a pawn. No longer prey. I am the moon's chosen. I am the queen of wolves. And across the ruins of Ironfang, her declaration carried, sinking into every trembling chest. A vow. A promise. A warning. The age of the Silver Queen had begun. Episode 18, The Alpha's Surrender. The battlefield still reeked of smoke and blood. The fires that had eaten through Ironfang's gates smoldered in the night, sparks rising into the bruised sky. The survivors had pulled the wounded into the courtyard, forming clusters of trembling bodies, some whispering prayers to the moon, others staring blankly as though their souls had been left behind in the carnage. Amelie walked among them. Her bare feet left faint silver prints upon the scorched stone, light glowing faintly before fading, as if the earth itself acknowledged each step. Wherever her gaze fell, wolves lowered their eyes. The once unyielding warriors of Iron Fang now looked at her with awe, as though they weren't sure whether she was flesh or something divine that had descended to walk among them. But behind her reverence lay something else, fear. She could feel it, threaded through the air like a cold draft. Fear not of the council, nor of death, but of her. Of the power she had unleashed, of the silver fire that had burned a champion of the council to ash. They wondered what she truly was. They wondered whether she was still one of them. Her heart clenched, but she did not falter. She forced her chin high, her back straight. If she let them see doubt, if she let them see the girl still trembling inside, they would never follow her into what was coming. The doors of the great hall groaned open, and from the shadows emerged the pack's alpha. Alpha Dorian, scarred, grizzled, a man who had survived 3 wars and buried too many sons to count. His shoulders were broad, but age had weighed them, his silvered hair falling over eyes that had seen too much. The courtyard hushed as he approached, the air thick with anticipation. For years, Dorian's word had been law, his dominance the chain that bound Iron Fang together. And yet now, every wolf in sight turned not to him, but to her. He stopped a few paces from Amelie, his dark eyes unreadable. The silence stretched, heavy enough to crush bone. Then, slowly, he sank to one knee. A ripple went through the courtyard, shock, disbelief, the sound of 100 sharp breaths. No alpha bowed, not unless his bloodline was broken or his spirit shattered. But this was neither. This was surrender, yes, but also recognition. Silver Queen, he said, his gravel voice carrying into every corner of the courtyard. The goddess has chosen you. And Iron Fang bows to her will. The murmurs broke into cries, some joyous, others angry, all bewildered. A queen was not an alpha. No wolf alive had ever served both. The structure of packs had been unshakable for centuries, and yet here, before their very eyes, it crumbled. Amelie stared down at the kneeling alpha, her throat tight. This man had once denied her entry into Iron Fang, had questioned her worth, had warned the triplets she was a danger. She had spent nights hating him, wishing he would see her as more than a broken pup. And now, here he was, on his knees. Her wolf pressed at the edges of her chest, restless, clawing to be let free, but still bound, still caged. The irony cut deep. She stood crowned by the goddess herself, yet she could not shift like the wolves around her. She wondered if they could sense it, if Dorian could. Behind her, Gideon stiffened, unable to mask his distrust. Rourke's hand hovered near his blade, uncertain, his eyes flicking between her and the alpha. They had fought under Dorian's command all their lives, but now they were watching something older, deeper, break apart. Amelie stepped forward, her voice steady though her hands trembled at her sides. You kneel to me now. But do you accept me as your leader, or only as the goddess's puppet? Dorian lifted his gaze, and for the first time, there was no defiance in it. Only weariness, and something that almost looked like pride. I have lived long enough to know when a crown is earned. You are not my puppet, girl. You are the fire that will burn this cursed age to ash. He lowered his head again. And Iron Fang will follow you, until death takes us. Her chest tightened, a strange mix of grief and resolve filling her. She had wanted his respect for so long. Now she had it, but it came with chains heavier than any gunner had ever put on her. The crowd erupted, wolves dropping one by one to their knees, the old order collapsing in a storm of submission. The sound of their oaths echoed into the night, carried on the wind, binding her to them in ways she could never undo. Gideon moved close, his voice low in her ear. You've taken everything from him. From them. Do you realize what that means? You're not just their queen now, Ellie. You're their future. Their survival depends on you. Rourke's gaze burned hotter, sharper. And the council knows it. They won't stop after one defeat. They'll come harder. They'll come with armies meant to end bloodlines. And they'll target the one who holds them all together. You. Amelie's breath caught. For a fleeting moment, she wanted to run, to curl back into the shadows and hide as she once had. But the memory of Gunnar's chains rose in her mind, the taste of blood in her mouth, the echo of screams she could never forget. She was done running. She raised her chin, addressing them all. The council will come. Gunnar will come. Every enemy who thinks I am weak will come. Let them. I will not break. I will not kneel. I am the queen the goddess has chosen, and I swear to you now, by blood, by fire, by the moonlight itself, that I will lead you. And I will see us free. The courtyard erupted in howls, a chorus that shook the very walls of Ironfang. Her vow burned in the night like a brand, searing into every wolf who heard it. But deep within the shadows of the forest beyond, unseen eyes watched. And a voice, ragged and cruel, whispered in the dark. Then let us see how brightly the Silver Queen burns, before she turns to ash. Episode 19, Blood and Fire. The night was thick with tension, the kind that made even the air taste of metal and ash. The distant drums had started hours ago, faint at first, but now so close that every strike thudded against the ribs of those who waited. The wolves of Ironfang stood ready on the ramparts, their shadows flickering in torchlight, jaws clenched, hearts drumming in rhythm with the enemy's march. They all knew what was coming. Amelie stood at the highest point of the wall, her silver-threaded hair whipping in the wind. Below her, the courtyard was filled with wolves, Ironfang warriors, rogues who had sworn to her after seeing the fire she carried, even trembling pups pressed into carrying supplies and tending to the wounded from earlier skirmishes. They looked up at her as if she could bend fate itself with a word. It was suffocating, the weight of their hope. Beside her stood Gideon, restless, his hand never far from the hilt of his blade. Rourke leaned against the stone, his eyes narrowed, scanning the tree-line where shadows writhed. And Scar lingered at the edge, silent, his scarred face unreadable but his aura coiled like a wolf ready to pounce. The council, Gideon muttered, his voice low, meant only for her. And Gunnar. They've come together for this. Blood enemies, side by side. Just to crush you. Amelie's fingers curled into fists. The thought of Gunnar made her throat burn. His chains, his sneer, the blood oath he had forced on her at 8 years old, it all came back, a wound that never closed. Now he marched on her gates with the council at his back. A man who had wanted to own her, now determined to destroy her. A low horn moaned across the dark hills, and from the trees they came. Thousands. Wolves in formation, sorcerers with hands already burning with runes, vampires in armor black as oil. And at their head, 2 figures. One cloaked in the robes of the council, the other bareheaded, his cruel smile visible even at this distance. Gunnar. A growl rolled through the Ironfang ranks, but fear swam beneath it. The enemy was larger, better equipped, and merciless. The council had not come to negotiate. They had come to end a threat before it grew beyond their control. Amelie lifted her hand, and silence fell behind her. Every wolf waited, ears pricked, eyes burning. Her chest tightened. For a moment she thought her voice would fail her, but then her wolf pushed against her ribcage, a deep thrum like a drum of war. We will not break, she shouted, her voice carrying unnaturally far, as though the goddess herself lent her breath. We will not bow. Tonight, blood will be spilled. Tonight, fire will consume. But not us. Them. A howl tore from her throat, unbidden, fierce and raw. The pack answered, the sound rising like thunder, shaking the very earth. Even as fear gnawed at them, they howled for her. For their queen. The enemy surged forward. The first wave hit like a storm, wolves crashing against wolves, claws scraping stone, teeth sinking into flesh. The courtyard drowned in violence. Arrows rained from the tree-line, set ablaze by sorcerers, streaking fire across the night. Vampires leapt onto the walls with impossible grace, cutting down defenders before disappearing into shadow. Gideon fought like a blade set aflame, his strikes precise, lethal, cutting down 3 enemies before they could even touch him. Rourke bellowed orders, dragging wounded to safety even as he split skulls with his axe. Scar moved like death itself, silent, methodical, every strike ending in a kill. And Amelie burned. The silver fire that lived in her veins roared to life, flooding the battlefield in flashes of light that seared enemies to ash. Every time she struck, the tide turned. Every time she faltered, the wolves rallied, protecting her as if her life was worth more than theirs. But the enemy was endless. For every wolf she burned down, 3 more crawled from the dark. The council sorcerers pressed closer, weaving runes of binding, their power humming against her bones. And then she saw him. Gunnar. He moved through the chaos like a predator savoring the hunt, his eyes never leaving her. His pack tore through defenders, clearing a path, until he stood at the center of the courtyard, his lips curled into that same smile she remembered from childhood nightmares. "Ellie," he called, a voice carrying through screams and fire. "My little pup. My bride-to-be. Did you think you could run forever?" Her rage almost broke her in half. She leapt down from the wall, landing in a burst of silver flame, and the ground cracked beneath her. Their eyes locked, and for a heartbeat the war fell away. It was just them, the chains between them, the blood oath he had forged in cruelty. "You'll never touch me again," she hissed, her power spilling into the air like a storm. He laughed, dark and booming. "You already belong to me. And when I'm done, I'll drag your broken body before the council as proof. They will see you kneel at my side." They collided. Her fire met his shadow, silver against black. The courtyard lit as if the moon had crashed to earth, the shockwave sending wolves flying in all directions. Their power tangled, clashed, clawed at each other, and for the first time Amelie felt how deep his strength ran. He had fed on blood, stolen magic, twisted the oath into armor. Her knees buckled, her wolf screamed in her chest, and for a terrible moment, she thought he was right, that she was still chained, still weak. But then hands caught her. Gideon's voice in her ear, harsh and steady. "You're not alone." Rourke on her other side, lifting her before she fell. Scar behind them, holding the line. The triplets closed around her, their bond like iron, their power braided with hers. And together, they surged. The fire in her veins flared blinding bright, no longer silver alone but streaked with crimson and gold. Gunnar staggered, his grin faltering as cracks ripped across his shield of shadows. His eyes widened as if, for the first time, he realized she was no child, no pup, no pawn. She was the queen the moon had promised. Amelie roared, her fire consuming the courtyard, swallowing Gunnar's shadows whole. The ground trembled, the night split, and for a breathless instant it seemed the world itself held still. When the light faded, the battlefield was littered with ash and blood. The council's army staggered, broken, but not defeated. Gunnar still stood, singed, his grin twisted with fury instead of triumph. "This isn't over," he spat, retreating into shadow. "Blood and fire, pup. You'll drown in both." And then he was gone. Amelie collapsed, her body shaking, the fire inside her guttering. The triplets caught her before she hit the ground, their eyes fierce with both love and fear. Around them Iron Fang howled, their voices hoarse but victorious. The enemy had been driven back. For now. But Amelie knew this was only the beginning. The council would come again. Gunnar would never stop. And blood and fire would haunt her until one of them was gone for good. She lifted her head, her voice barely a whisper but strong enough to carry. "This war is not over. It has only begun." The howls rose again, but under them, the night still burned. Episode 20, Scar of the Rejected Mate. The battlefield still smelled of iron and smoke, the ashes of Gunnar's retreat lingering in the air. Wolves worked silently through the ruins, carrying the wounded, burying the fallen. Every corner of Iron Fang bore the mark of fire and blood, but still the heart of the pack beat on. Still, they lived. Amelie stood on the steps of the broken courtyard, her body aching with every breath. Silver flames flickered faintly in her veins, enough to keep her upright but not enough to burn. The triplets hovered near her, unwilling to leave her side after what she had unleashed. But Scar was gone. He had vanished the moment Gunnar retreated, slipping into the shadows like a ghost. It gnawed at her. He had fought with them, bled with them, shielded her when even Gideon could not reach her. And yet, she could not shake the weight of the secrets he carried. By midnight, she found him. Scar knelt at the edge of the woods, where the moonlight cut sharp lines across his ruined face. His blade was buried in the earth, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. He didn't turn when she approached, though his body stiffened as if he had smelled her coming. "You should be resting," he rasped. "So should you," she said softly, stepping closer. Silence hung between them, heavy as chains. The wolves sang mournful howls in the distance, but here, only the rustle of leaves filled the night. "You fought like a man with nothing to lose," Amelie said. "But that's not true, is it? You fight like someone who has already lost everything." Scar's hands curled into fists against his knees. She saw his knuckles pale, the scars twisting tighter. At last, he lifted his gaze, and for the first time since she had known him, he let her see the truth in his eyes. "I was not always Scar," he said. "Once. I had another name. Another face. I was the heir of a powerful alpha. Strong, proud. And I had a mate." Amelie's chest squeezed. His voice was hollow, like something gutted long ago. "She was light. She was laughter. She was everything I thought I deserved. But when the bond snapped into place, she looked at me with horror. Do you know what it is, Amelie? To feel the goddess gift you a soul, only to watch them reject it in front of the pack." His words cut deeper than any blade. She could almost see it, the circle of wolves, his mate's revulsion, the humiliation carved into him before the eyes of his people. "She told me I was weak," he went on, his tone breaking, low and bitter. "That I was unworthy. That she would never chain herself to a scarred, broken wolf. So she chose another. And I became Scar. The name they gave me after they burned my face and cast me out." Amelie swallowed, her heart twisting. She had been chained to Gunnar's blood oath at 8 years old. Scar had been chained to rejection and humiliation. Different wounds, but both carved into their bones by cruelty. "That is why you never look me in the eye," she whispered. "Why you always stand in the shadows. You think you're still that boy. The rejected one." He laughed bitterly, though it sounded more like a sob. "I am that boy. And yet, when I look at you, when I fight at your side, the bond stirs again. The goddess mocks me, Amelie. Because I feel something I should not. Something I cannot have." Her breath caught. "You're saying?" He finally looked at her, his gaze raw, unshielded. "I feel the mate bond with you. The queen the moon has chosen. But you already belong to them." His eyes flicked toward the triplets, his jaw tight with anguish. "I will never steal what is not mine. I am not that cruel." The truth shattered her. She felt it too, every time Scar had caught her when she stumbled, every time his eyes lingered a heartbeat too long, every time her wolf quickened in his presence. The goddess had twisted the threads cruelly. Before she could speak, a howl split the night, sharp, urgent. Not warning. Warning. The council had returned. Torches blazed in the trees, shadows spilling into the clearing as hundreds of wolves advanced. Gunnar was not at their head this time. Instead, cloaked figures strode forward, their runes glowing like blood in the dark. The full council. All of them. Scar rose, his blade gleaming in the moonlight. "They come to end it," he said. "No more battles. No more retreats. Tonight they will burn Iron Fang to the ground." Amelie's fire answered before she could. It surged in her veins, fierce and wild, though her body trembled from exhaustion. Gideon, Rourke, and Cale appeared at her sides, weapons ready, their eyes bright with fury. The pack behind them lifted their heads, scarred but unbroken. "Then we end it first," Amelie said, her voice carrying like steel across the night. The council struck. Spells ripped across the battlefield, chains of fire and shadow binding wolves, crushing warriors where they stood. Iron Fang roared back, their claws and teeth tearing into the enemy, but the council's magic was merciless. Wolves fell. Blood slicked the grass. The night blazed red. Amelie fought at the center, her silver fire clashing against the council's runes. For every spell she broke, another struck. She staggered, but the triplets held her up, lending their strength. Together they moved as one, blade, axe, and fang woven with her flame. And then, through the chaos, Scar came. He cut through spell and sorcerer alike, his blade dripping crimson, his eyes burning with something more than rage. Every strike was for his past. Every step was for her. He fought not as a shadow, not as Scar, but as the mate he should have been. The final blow came when the council's leader raised his staff, a spell to split the earth itself. It would have ended them all, Amelie, the pack, Iron Fang itself. Scar saw it first. He moved without hesitation. With a roar, he shoved Amelie aside, his body taking the brunt of the spell. Fire and shadow ripped across him, searing flesh, shattering bone. His scream was swallowed by the explosion, his body thrown like a broken doll across the stones. Scar! Amelie screamed, her voice tearing from her throat. Rage drowned her grief. Her wolf surged, her fire erupted, and with the triplets at her side, she struck. The silver fire consumed the council's leader, burning him to ash. One by one the cloaked figures fell, their screams scattering into the night until only silence remained. When the last sorcerer crumbled, the battlefield lay in ruin. Smoke rose. Wolves panted in exhaustion. The council was gone. Iron Fang lived. Amelie stumbled to Scar's side. He lay broken, his scars burned deeper, his breaths shallow. Blood pooled beneath him, his blade fallen at his side. His eyes fluttered open when she touched his face. "You should have let me fall," he whispered. She shook her head, tears blurring her vision. "Never. You saved me. You saved all of us." His lips curved, faint, trembling. "Then maybe I was not rejected, after all." His hand brushed hers, rough and shaking. "Promise me, lead them. Be the queen they need. Even if I cannot be by your side." "Don't," she choked. "Don't you dare leave me. Don't you dare." But his eyes closed, his chest stilled. The world went quiet. Wolves around her lowered their heads, howls rising, not of victory but mourning. A sound that shook the heavens, carrying grief and reverence for the scarred warrior who had given everything. Amelie bowed her head over him, her tears falling on his broken skin. In that moment, with the moon high above and the pack howling for their fallen, she knew. She was the queen now. Bound by blood, by fire, by loss. And she would not fail them. As the howls echoed into the endless night, Amelie rose, her silver fire lighting the ruins. Her voice cut through the grief like a blade. "This is not the end," she declared. "This is the beginning. Scar's blood will not be forgotten. Iron Fang will rise. And the goddess herself will tremble when we come." The wolves roared back, a storm of fury and devotion. The war was not over. It had only just begun.